Okay, great. Well, good evening, everybody. And if you can advance to the next slide, please. My name is Jing Yo. I am the manager of the City Planning Division for the City of Santa Monica. I'll be moderating the meeting tonight. And tonight I'll be joined by Isla Scott from the city's Housing Division. And you're also going to hear from Sarah Lutz, Executive Director of Hollywood Community Housing Corporation, and Kevin Daly, who is the architect of the proposal. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your evening to join us for this fifth community meeting on this proposal. Next slide, please. On tonight's agenda, we'll be covering a recap, really, of the council's direction that led to changes in the proposal and response to questions that we've received. City staff are going to be providing background on why these sites were identified for affordable housing and on financing considerations and public parking. And then the development team will be reviewing the revised proposal and design changes in response to community comments that have been received. And then finally, we will be leaving ample time for question and answer. It'll be a live question and answer, and we'll talk through how that will work tonight. We want to be respectful of everybody's time this evening. Understand everyone's really busy. So we've budgeted about an hour and a half for this meeting, but rest assured, it is our intention to make sure that everybody's questions are answered. So we'll be here, as long as there are questions that need to be answered. Next slide, please. Tonight's meeting is being recorded. And the presentation, so the PowerPoint you see tonight and the recording will be posted on the city's website at santamonica.gov/housing-news. And it will be also posted to the project's website, hchcsantamonica.org. And there's links there to the community meeting. So that will link to the city's website where the presentation and the recording will be available in case your friends and neighbors weren't able to make the meeting or you'd like to review any of the material. It will be available there. Comments and questions on the proposal can continue to be submitted through the project website through October 31st at hchcsantamonica.org/contact. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague Isla to start getting into some of the background of the project.
Thank you, Jing. This is a brief timeline of, which highlights key milestones and context that have led us to tonight's meeting. So in 2022, the City Council adopted the 2021 to 2029 housing element, which is a state-required housing plan that my colleague Jing will speak about later in the presentation. The housing element was where the city committed to developing the three city-owned parking lots that we're going to be speaking about tonight. As required in the housing element, the city in 2023 released a request for proposals to solicit development proposals from development teams. And this year, the City Council selected the team led by Hollywood Community Housing Corporation. And the developer Hollywood Community Housing Corporation hosted 4 community meetings over the summer. On August 27th, the City Council provided direction to continue negotiations with HCHC based upon a revised proposal. So just for context, during this time period, the City Council declared and extended a local emergency declaration on homelessness in an effort to streamline, accelerate, and expedite the provision of services and housing for Santa Monicans at risk of homelessness or experiencing homelessness, or to address local impacts of homelessness. So if you'll advance the slide. So this was the City Council direction that was provided on August 27th. I won't read back word for word all of it, it's there for you to read, but the direction essentially was to continue negotiations with HCHC based upon a revised proposal that would include family housing on Euclid Street and senior housing on 14th Street, with 40 of the senior housing apartments reserved for senior permanent supportive housing, provided that HCHC could acquire the neighboring property at 1402 Wilshire, which you probably know as Unleashed by Petco. The combined site would be stepped down to reduce the height adjacent to residential buildings on 14th Street. And the 16th Street parking lot would remain as a parking lot, so undeveloped. So I will hand it over now to Jing to discuss how these parking lots were identified for housing and what the city's obligations are under state law.
Thanks, Isla. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that we have heard is, how did city-owned sites throughout the city get identified to accommodate affordable housing? So this was really something that is included in the certified housing element, and that is a mandatory state requirement that the city has to go through every 8 years to demonstrate that there's the capacity to accommodate housing needs in the city. Identification of the city-owned sites unfolded over a 2.5-year process, which was the adoption of the housing element, and it was included pursuant to council direction with the October 2021 housing element, and then further confirmed through revisions in the final adoption that occurred in 2022. What sort of directs this is that there is very specific state law that requires that the city identify sites across the city to accommodate, in Santa Monica's case, about 1,800 lower income units. And there's special rules that apply to that, which that the sites have to allow 100% housing or 50% housing mix. And those sites have to be spread throughout the city in order to address the fair housing requirements under housing element law. So, that's really how the city sites were identified as part of the housing element. If the city-owned sites were not identified to address that those 1,800 lower income units, the housing capacity in the housing element would have to have increased well beyond the 13,000 units that was studied. What does that mean in practicality? It would have meant substantially more density would be allowed on selected sites throughout the city. And, at some point it's, there would have been questions from the state whether that was possible. So, the city was very much put in a position where we were somewhat boxed in to make different choices as a result of state law. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the city-owned sites across the city that have been identified in the housing element to demonstrate that commitment. That was a requirement from the state that the city demonstrate that commitment by identifying kind of an estimated capacity, not only identifying the sites, but showing an estimated capacity of how you would achieve those units. And you can see the sites range, from really north to south throughout the entire city. And although there's more parcels here, you can see there 1318 4th Street has a council approval for affordable housing on that site. The parking lots on the second line there are the subject of tonight's meeting. A site at 4th in Arizona, the Bergamot Arts Center, and then parking lots behind Main Street were all identified as part of the housing element process. Next slide, please. So what is the city obligated to do under the housing element with respect to these sites? So the housing element is an obligation to plan and is not an obligation to build. So under this, it's program 2E in the housing element, the city's commitment is that we have to issue a request for proposal, to offer up these sites for affordable housing on a schedule. And per those units that are set forth in the housing element. So the city really, our obligation is to go through the good faith process to put these sites out for into the public domain, invite development proposals. And it's something the city has a long history of doing that throughout the city. So this is really a continuation of that of the city's practice in that regard. And the housing element obligates us, to continue that process, to identify partners for affordable housing, and again, make that good faith effort to bring that housing to fruition. There are other programs in the housing element, that generally require the city to continue to seek and leverage funds to seek development of a range of permanent supportive housing options. Again, to reduce the number of homeless individuals within the city. So these two programs, kind of work together to set forth the city's housing element obligations. Next slide. What happens if the city doesn't meet those obligations? Under state law, implementation of the housing element is mandatory. The city has no choice in this, and the consequences can be substantial. The city, has experienced those consequences. Many of you may have heard of builders remedy projects, that were filed, and if we were out of compliance, it could open the door to that again. Potentially the loss of qualification for affordable housing. There's the potential for third-party private litigation to be, brought forth as well. In addition, the state can seek judicial relief and impose penalties and fines. So, there is teeth behind, the state's requirement that the city implement the housing element. And with that, I'll turn it back to Isla to talk about affordable housing financing.
Thank you, Jane. Now that we've covered the city's obligations under the housing element, I'll describe some of the financial considerations involved in building 100% affordable housing. Unlike market rate housing, 100% affordable housing relies very heavily on a variety of public funding sources for construction. No one source can fund all of the cost of building 100% affordable housing. So typically developments rely on cobbling together various sources. I've listed some of those here on the slide: federal and state tax credits, state loan programs. They could be grants, public agency grants or philanthropic grants, bank loans. So that could be for construction financing and also typically for a mortgage. And finally, as a source of gap funding, when all of the above funding sources have been exhausted, some local jurisdictions, such as Santa Monica's, have local sources of funding that can be used to supplement those. So in the case of Santa Monica, it's the City Housing Trust Funds, which are intended to close any remaining gap. And all of these requirements, all of these programs, I should say, that are listed here, they all have their own requirements for how the funds can be used, what type of population can be served, the income levels of the population in the buildings, et cetera. So one of the stated goals in the request for proposals was to maximize competitiveness for non-city sources of funding, so that the need for city housing trust funds would be minimized to the extent possible. So combining city sources with outside resources, as much as that can be done, it extends the reach of the city housing trust funds so that they can go farther in assisting more households. So, one thing to note is that there are some important trends that have really affected what can feasibly be built on these sites. There have been several trends that have affected affordable housing construction in general in the last few years, and particularly since the pandemic. So one is that construction costs have increased greatly. This is due to increased costs for materials, labor, insurance. There have been supply chain issues on top of longstanding requirements from public funding programs for things like prevailing wage, paying a certain wage for the labor that's used for construction. And so sometimes public funding programs also, require other sorts of public benefits. So, the cost has increased greatly over the last few years. A second trend that's important to note is just that competition for funding has increased tremendously in the last few years. So while not all state programs require funds to be used for permanent supportive housing, in many cases, developments are incentivized to do so in order to be competitive for those state funds. So ultimately, if a development is unsuccessful in obtaining outside funding, what happens is the need for the city gap financing would substantially increase to the point where it just may not be feasible to move forward. So let's advance to the next slide. So the discussion of financing ties in with considerations also about replacement public parking. So at the March 19th, 2024 City Council meeting, in which Council authorized the city manager to execute an exclusive negotiating agreement with Hollywood Community Housing, Council asked questions and discussed the proposal. The proposal presented alternative scenarios with no on-site replacement public parking and with There was some discussion about the cost of public parking replacement as presented in the proposal and where the money would come from. And it was discussed that if there were any non-city sources of funds that could be used to pay for the public parking construction, ultimately it would create a gap in the financing for the housing that the city housing trust funds would then need to fill. Ultimately, council did not give direction to include replacement public parking in the proposal. Can you advance the slide, please? So the only explicit direction thus far that the city council has provided with regards to public parking replacement at these sites is to retain the current use of the parking lot at 1146 16th Street. The current revised proposal does not include on-site public parking replacement at the affordable housing developments, as there are no dedicated non-city sources of funds available to finance the construction of public parking. And the limited city funds that are available for new developments are being devoted to construction of apartments based on council priorities. The city is researching additional solutions to address community concerns related to the loss of public parking at Euclid and 14th. However, any decision regarding replacement public parking, including any city financial contribution, would be at the direction and approval of the city council. Next slide, please. So now I'll hand it off to the development team to present their latest revised proposal.
Thank you, Isla and Jing. I'm Sarah Letts with Hollywood Community Housing. Tonight, I look forward to sharing ways the development team has continued to make progress in our efforts to address community feedback. Over the past 8 months, we've received over 400 comments, and some of the feedback led us to explore the possibility of acquiring 1402 Wilshire, which is also known as the Petco site, which is adjacent to the public parking lot on 14th Street. As previously mentioned, direction from City Council on August 27th is for city staff to continue negotiating with us with a revised project concept that includes the Petco site and excludes the development of 16th Street, thus keeping it as public parking. So box number 2 summarizes the various ways we have received the public comment over the past 8 months. And box number 5 is where we're headed currently. On the second bullet point talks about the Euclid site. Since the July presentation of our plans, it has been intended to develop family housing on the Euclid site. That's still our intention. And the difference is that we will increase the number of family units on the Euclid site from 45 to 48. And the biggest difference is on the 14th Street site. So when you tie together assuming we can acquire the Petco site and do a lot tie with the public parking lot, we would develop 82 apartments, which is a little bit different than what is in the direction from council on August 27th, which mentioned 85 apartments. We're dropping it by 3 units to 82 units, so that at the end of the day, the combination of 14th Street and Euclid Street still is at the 130 total apartments. For the property on 14th Street, a big change is that we heard about the needs of seniors. So our intention now is to serve seniors age 55 and over on the site on 14th Street. And there would be 2 on-site managers, as we mentioned back in July. 40 of the apartments would be for seniors who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. And the other 40 would be for seniors who have a low income. And next slide. So high level, again, 14th Street will serve seniors. Previously in July, when we had our presentations, we didn't have any units designated for seniors, and now we have the property on 14th Street exclusively for seniors. As already mentioned, 16th Street will remain as public parking. The third bullet point is that we are attempting to acquire the property at 1402 Wilshire, the Petco site. And the good news about this acquisition, if we do complete the acquisition and buy the site, is that it can mitigate some of the height concerns that were expressed when we receive feedback. And the last thing is I want to talk about increasing security at the 14th Street property. So I'll get into more detail a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide. The current proposal, Kevin will go into more detail, and for the site on Euclid, we will have, like I said, 48 apartments. So it'll be mostly 2 and 3 bedroom units. So it's 55% of the units are 3 and 4 bedroom, 2 and 3 bedroom units. And then we'll have 21 1-bedroom apartments. And then on the 14th Street site, as I mentioned, it'll be 80 1-bedroom apartments, half as supportive housing. And there will be 2 2-bedroom units for on-site personnel. So you can see in that top left-hand side, the totals for the unit types and totaling up to 130 units. So next slide. I'm gonna reference our presentation in July to nod to the fact that we have incorporated some feedback. And then the next slide will again reiterate the feedback that we're going to present in the designs in a few minutes. So back in July, and this was basically feedback we received in the spring after the May community meetings. So the family building was moved from 14th to Euclid. And we heard about concerns about alley congestion. So Kevin will show you images which show how the queuing has been moved inside the property line. So we hope to minimize, congestion in the alley as much as possible, but the drawings will help you visualize how we'll accomplish that. With regards to staffing, in July, we committed to having 2 on-site personnel. Originally, it was 1, but now there's 2 units dedicated to on-site personnel. Site security we talked about in July, and we talked about some of the physical features like perimeter fencing, fob, access gates, security cameras, etc. And lastly, there was some discussion in July about would community services be open to the broader community, or was it really going to be dedicated to people living on site? And so the answer is the latter. We talked in the community meetings about the services offered on site would be for the people living on site. Next slide. The October updates are, you've heard it already about 16th Street, it's going to remain as public parking. That the population served previously did not include seniors, and now we're going to have an 82 unit building with 2 of the units as on-site personnel, so 80 units for seniors in need of affordable housing. The staffing on site for 14th Street will now include, we're going to pay a security guard for the first year. So as you finish a building and lease it up and become stabilized, we've committed to hiring a security guard nights and weekends during the first year of operations. The fourth line talks about the buildings stepping down on 14th Street with 6-story buildings closer to Wilshire, decreasing to 3 and 4-story. That final building is partially 3, partially 4. So the building heights, we're hoping, has addressed some of the concerns we have heard. And the last thing is there will be no studio apartments. We heard from people, not everybody, but we did hear from some people that, studios are not ideal. And so we found a way to have the minimum unit size be at least a 1-bedroom apartment. So we feel like that's a positive change. Next slide. Oh, and now it is for Kevin Daly to present the drawings. Kevin, we can't hear you.
Now we go.
Okay, got
it. Thank you, Sarah. And thanks everyone for taking time out of your schedules and joining us tonight. I think the information we have is going to be available on the website. It will also be, queued up. And so if people have questions about specific images and specific slides they see, we can always scroll back to them during the question and answer period. But I think Sarah's made this clear, but in case people have not, are kind of new to the process and have not been able to join other meetings, Wilshire Boulevard's right along here. This tiny little site at 16th was kind of the problematic one. It's a 50-foot wide site. That's the one that is going to remain as parking. And that simplified things because what we're allowed to do then is move some of that density onto the other sites. Hollywood has been able to, begin negotiations to take over the Petco. And that's had the Petco site on 14th. And that's had a couple of really positive architectural impacts, which is that it has kind of made kind of a more urban, solution out of the whole project, because we were able to move density right up onto Wilshire Boulevard, kind of where it belongs and where all the kind of early theory about, kind of thinking about the nature of the future of Santa Monica has always been about placing density on Wilshire. So those are the two sites, and you can see here, just for reference, the big medical center right there. I think everybody is probably pretty oriented to exactly where, what's going on here. So let's go to the next slide. So these are very early kind of representations of mostly of the massing of where, the kind of where the kind of primary building elements are going to go. In all this kind of shuffling over the last couple of months of moving all the multifamily, the kind of larger apartments onto Euclid, really in response to the kind of, the local, information we got from neighbors there who kind of said, look, Euclid is kind of the family street. 14th is a busier street. It's a better place for apartments with more bedrooms. But that meant we had to redesign that site. And we'll take a closer look at both of them. And the other site obviously also had to be redesigned as we kind of pushed massing all the way up here. You can kind of see here, right up to Wilshire Boulevard. And I think it's a little bit hard to see in the plan, so I'll just call attention to this right here, is that this is 6 stories. 6 stories. It starts stepping down, and there's a roof garden up there. But this back here at the alley, 3 stories. So we've really tried to respond to some of the comments we've heard about the kind of relationship of the new buildings to the kind of existing context. So let's go to the next slide. Here's a summary. Euclid is mostly family units, 2 and 3 bedrooms. We've I think fortunately been able to keep the number of multiple bedroom apartments at the kind of goal level at the level we wanted to before. And then 14th Street broken into kind of these clear, smaller buildings. And you can kind of see when these are together, what we've tried to do is kind of keep the proportions of these buildings kind of similar. So this piece right here, you can start to see how these are starting to relate to each other. And we want the scale of those to be similar and for these buildings to not be the same, but have a relationship in scale to each other. So let's go to the next slide. And here's a closer look at Euclid. And you can see Euclid previously had been kind of developed as a single big facade facing Euclid Street. We've broken this up, and now it's kind of a couple buildings here. And you can also see we've started to kind of erode the corners of the buildings with balconies and kind of projections. And doing that kind of, just kind of changes the way the building sits against the street and the kind of light that goes past it. And some of the architectural characteristics we showed before on Euclid of some kind of screened and kind of occupiable, almost like an occupiable facade, that's remained, but it's a smaller piece. So let's go to the next slide. Here's the plan at the ground level. And you can see we've taken this big piece of the building and just kind of turned it a little bit to the south. And I think what that really does is allow a lot more light to come through and really provide a lot of daylight to the center of the building. And you'll be able to see on the upper levels, the whole project's kind of like that. You can also see here that, you know, this is one of the issues that Sarah mentioned, that we've pulled the kind of control point of the parking back quite a ways from the alley. And that makes it so that cars waiting for a gate to roll up or for a gate to open really are not blocking any of the traffic in the alley. And so that's been kind of an objective in some of the site planning. You know, Southern California Edison, trash and recycling really takes up a lot of the ground level. But in spite of that, we've been able to keep 8 or 10 parking spaces down here for people visiting for a short period of time. A lot of public areas, and you can kind of see we've pulled the building back, and there's kind of a play area for kids that's open to the sky for a portion of it, and really kind of heavily planted sidewalks. So here on Euclid, here's the kind of primary stair that brings people upstairs. If you're arriving by foot, let's go to the next slide. This shows one of the response to one of the issues really people expressed a lot of concern about. Well, what's the security situation here? Are people going to be able to kind of, you know, get in under these buildings and things like that? So the red line shows the security perimeter, where gates and doors occur, where vehicle access is. And I think in this respect, we've really got a very kind of sound and safe for the community and safe for the residents kind of strategy. So let's go to the next level. So here's the second floor. You can see that we've really kind of minimized the podium in some ways, really kind of pulled it back. So there's just really a lot of light coming through all the way through the buildings. But this is still the kind of primary, this is the kind of meeting space for the meeting floor for the people who live here. Let's go to the next one. We've been able to maintain a roof terrace, a shared community terrace. And you'll also notice that this probably has the best view out towards the coast, but is also the kind of least intrusive, spot for a roof deck with respect to the neighbors. So we've really been able to kind of locate that in a way, kind of tucked up against one of the big existing trees. So then let's take a look at the Wilshire site. This is the one that's obviously changed the most. And what we've done is make a building that, along from here to here, it kind of reads as a single building. It's double loaded, so there's a corridor that serves apartments on each side. But then we get here, and it's a single loaded piece. So it's a much skinnier element, and then another double loaded piece and another skinny one. So what we're trying to do is kind of get the massing to match the project on Euclid. It's got a totally different character because it's got, many, many more smaller units. And you can also see that all along here at the street, we've really made an effort to keep the kind of perimeter open and at the same time really establish a strong kind of, strong kind of security perimeter at the same time. So let's go to the next slide. Here's the ground floor, a little bit hard to read. So just once again, here's 14th Street. Here's Wilshire out here. Kind of a glass facing element on Wilshire, just like all of Wilshire, only like it has stores and things like that, kind of pedestrian oriented here. And then kind of a heavy, landscape perimeter here and at the very south of the project. Parking is on grade. And I think one of the real benefits of being able to kind of obtain this other site is that we were able to eliminate the underground parking, which is, with respect to the community and the neighborhood, probably an extra 3 or 4 months of very heavy and noisy construction and trucks coming in and out and things like that. So to not have to dig all that excavation out and instead provide the parking we need just at grade, really simplifies construction, shortens construction, and lets a little bit more of the funding go into the project instead of underground for cars. I think I talked about how challenging it is to finance projects like this today. That's one of the kind of really substantial cost saving strategies that's available to us now. So let's go to the next one. Here you can see that same kind of security perimeter we talked about. Here's the vehicle gate right here. Here's the kind of waiting, queuing area for cars. Really simple double-loaded parking area here. You can also see that along 14th Street, there are areas where the landscape kind of goes on both sides of this fence. And so it allows us to maintain the kind of security perimeter and still kind of obscure it a little bit in the landscaping, so it doesn't really look like a block long piece with a tall fence. So let's go to the next slide. Here, ground floor units or second level units, manager units in each corner. So one manager kind of oriented towards the alley, one towards the street, Wilshire and 14th. And here you can kind of barely see the limits of the podium. So we have actually a really nice kind of public circulation way through here and small seating areas that are kind of developed where people who live here, have kind of informal, seating areas that are outside of their units. Let's go to the next one. Another roof deck. It's held away from our very southern property line, the property line kind of where if you were overlooking, you might be looking into someone's yard. So we've really developed this piece here as the kind of roof amenity. Little bit, this is PowerPoint's playing tricks on us. There is this piece of building here. This is the one that steps from 4 stories down to 3, and for some reason it's just not showing up in these graphics. But that's the kind of basic organization for this site. You can go one more. And I think, so Sarah, I'll kind of hand this back off to you. Happy to answer questions if people have them about the organization of the building and the kind of direction the design will be going. As I mentioned, this is still pretty preliminary. We really had to juggle a lot of the kind of building elements to get things, back into shape after the community meetings and the feedback we got and the sort of opportunity to expand one site and take another site off the development agenda altogether. So Sarah.
Thanks, Kevin. So we would like to invite you to an open house this Friday. So the reason is it's called Gramercy Place Apartments. Kevin Daly Architects designed it, and the building was completed in 2021. So it's a few years old. It is 64 apartments, so it's comparable. It's a little smaller, but comparable to 14th Street. But it is very similar to 14th Street in the sense that it is all the units are for people age 55 and older, and half of the apartments are for our supportive housing for seniors who have experienced homelessness. So it's very comparable in many ways. And so we're hoping that people will join us for an open house because Kevin will be there, I'll be there, the people concerned will be there. Also, I want to mention that we have a commercial tenant since this property faces Washington Boulevard. And we got a lot of feedback from the immediate community when we did our outreach for this particular site. And they wanted to see activation, and they wanted a commercial space on facing Washington Boulevard. So we included that. And after the building was done, the neighborhood council president introduced me to Jonathan Bajour, who's going to say a couple things because he's also going to be part of the open house on Friday. He is the commercial tenant occupying the space on the corner of Washington Boulevard and Gramercy Place. And anyway, so he also, I just found out not that long ago that he happens to be a Santa Monica resident just by coincidence. And so anyway, so Jonathan's going to say a couple things because he wants to also invite you to see his space, which is located on the ground floor of Gramercy Place Apartments. So Jonathan?
Hi. Yeah, so I'm the executive director of Rediscover Center. We're a 20-year-old arts education nonprofit. It was founded actually in Santa Monica. We have locations in Venice and in Mid-City at Gramercy Place Apartments. Overall, we serve about 14,000 youth per year at those two locations in the community and in 65 schools, including classes in every K-12 public school in Santa Monica. We do woodworking for youth as young as 8 years old and working all with recycled materials, so a strong sustainability message. We opened Rediscover Center Mid-City in Gramercy Place Apartments last year, and that was a public youth makerspace where we do camps, classes, family crafting events, and field trips. I look forward to showing anyone who can come to the open house what that center is like. It's a lot of fun. If you've got kids in your life, Friday morning is probably not the best time to do it, but we're also open at that location for free family crafting every Friday, 3 to 8 p.m. and Saturday, 10 to 4. It's a chance for the community to come in from any part of Los Angeles. We'll get folks coming in from the Mid-City neighborhood. We also get people coming in from everywhere, from Beverly Hills to Pasadena to Leimert Park. Hollywood Housing's been just a fantastic partner to work with. They're very responsive. They've been very supportive of our community outreach efforts, and they've been really focused on safety and comfort for us and for our clients and visitors. One example of that, we had planned to install a security system as we moved in and got the space up and running, but learned about what they had in place already with their cameras and their staffing and decided that they had everything covered that we would have needed. And just talk about some of those visitors that do come in. We've had thousands of kids coming through, families, and again, these are folks who could be going anywhere in LA. They feel perfectly comfortable coming to this building, working with us at this site, and we haven't heard any complaints about any issues related to the building or safety issues in the neighborhood. So we've been very happy with it. It's a great place and a great partnership. Happy to answer any questions you've got at those open house tours, 11, 12, and 1 this coming Friday.
Thank you so much. And so if you go to the project website, hchcsantamonica.org, and if you click on community meetings, you can go to the links to sign up for the open houses. So we're hoping that 11 and noon and 1, that one of those 3 options will be convenient. So please sign up, and we look forward to seeing as many people as possible on Friday, because we really feel like it's very comparable to what we've proposed on 14th Street, and we're really hoping that you can come see it firsthand. And with that, Jing.
Yeah, and sorry, go back one slide. Oh, there should be the next slide. Maybe the one following. Oh, is this back to Isla for next steps? Well, we'll come back to that. Let's go to the end slide here. So that actually brings us to the end of the presentation. And if you could just go to the next slide, please. So we'll now be opening the question and answer session. You'll see at the bottom, there's a raise hands feature. It's sort of right next to the participants button. I don't know if you have the same screen as I do, but you can see on the screen there, it's a hand icon. If you raise your hand, you will be called in the order at which you raise your hand, and we will unmute you to ask your question. So please go ahead, and if you would like to ask a question, please go ahead and raise your hand. And again, we will be calling you in the order that hands are raised. And just as a reminder, yep.
Oh, sorry, excuse the interruption. Isla, you are unmuted if you wanted to speak about next steps after Jing is finished.
Sorry about that. So I did want to just address the immediate next steps. So Council will be considering deal terms later this winter. So late this year, probably December or early next year, January. And then around that time, we anticipate there would also be a meeting of the Architectural Review Board, which would be the body that's delegated to provide the design approval. So things like, exterior finishes and things like that. So those are kind of like the next two major milestones in the development. I just wanted to make sure you all were aware of that.
Great, thank you, Isla. We'll go back to that slide and just wanted to remind everybody that the recording and the presentation tonight will again be posted. You can see the website there on the city's website. And if you don't get a chance, you need to leave for any reason, or you think about something after the meeting and you have additional questions or comments, you can submit those on the project website at hchcsantamonica.org. Each question will be answered and it will be posted to the website. So, just in case you don't get a chance to ask your question or you think of something else after the meeting, there will continue to be that opportunity after the meeting tonight. So I'm going to call on Gemstone first, and then Ellen Hannon will be after Gemstone. So go ahead,
Hello?
Gem. Hello? Yes.
Can you hear
Yep.
me?
We can hear you.
Good. And before I start, I'd like to apologize for having a problem with Zoom on my computer again. So it only worked with this one email account, and that's the name I use for my business. My name is Deborah Lynch, and just for full disclosure, I am a member of the Santa Monica Housing Commission, okay? So you would have known who I was if I had been able to use that email account. I have several questions, and I think I'm gonna cut them short and put it in the writing portion because there's so many people I think that want to, have questions answered. But I will focus on two, and one of them, which I usually do. I'm glad to see that in your plans, you have decided to at least allow 500 square feet and above for a one-bedroom apartment, but I still feel that's a little bit on the small side, especially for people if it's not necessarily seniors or seniors that need supportive housing. And the second thing is it wasn't really apparent to me when it was when the parking amenities were spoken of. I couldn't really tell where the parking was, and for that reason, I'm a little bit, if it was what I think it was. I'm a little bit concerned that we're using really wonderful square footage for parking of cars instead of affordable housing units. So I don't know if I can be a little bit more clear than that, or if you wish to ask me a question about those, but those are my two concerns.
Thank you, Deborah.
You're welcome.
Would anyone on the development team like to address those questions?
Well, I'll make a little pitch for the visit to Gramercy, because it kind of is both a positive and a kind of cautionary note for unit size and parking. The units there are quite a bit smaller than 500 square feet. And they're quite comfortable, really comfortable living space. So I think the 500, I think, will turn into really nice one-bedroom apartments. At Gramercy, there's a really extensive underground parking structure. It's really not very heavily used, and I think what we've been able to do is put underground parking, subterranean parking, only on Euclid. I think the sense is that people with larger families are more likely to need their own personal kind of transportation. And on the other site, we've really limited the parking to at grade. And so there's no excavation there. And I think that demographic is also less likely to have personal automobiles. So we've really tried to balance, parking is always a very expensive thing to build, try to balance the need for that with the cost impact it has for the overall project.
I don't know that I would agree with your assessment of that particular building. The people that would be moving in there would not have the need for parking. And I think we've addressed that before, that there's a lot of people that are getting into affordable housing that are hoping, if they're not currently working, to return to the workforce. And we all know that public transportation is nowhere near as sufficient as it needs to be able to where you need to get to. Okay, especially if you don't have management or upper level management type jobs. Okay, so a lot of these people, and more are going to be having vehicles if they don't already. And if they have to worry about parking on the street where they'll get ticketed all the time because of restrictions, it's going to be nasty for them, because these are people that have lower income than people who live on those streets with them in other buildings, okay, that already have parking. I think you might want to take a look at that again and address the problem. Because in Santa Monica, we're having really big pushback by people that are living in or attempting to live in affordable housing and cannot live there because there's no parking.
Great. Thank you for your comment.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm now going to call on Ellen Hannon, and then Jay Johnson will be after.
Maybe we could come back to Ellen Hannon.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't see.
oh,
You had
no
to
problem.
unmute me. I thought I had to unmute me and it wouldn't work. I'm sorry. I'm also chewing my dinner right now, but I agree with her what she said about the parking, especially for seniors who have disabilities and wheelchairs and things. And they also agree that there need to be some senior units that are larger because of all the apparatus that you need once you're a senior. I'm dealing with that myself, having all kinds of extra stuff if you're disabled or have arthritis or different things. So I do think that there should be some of those units, not all of them. There are some people who would use less, but there need to be some that are larger. And my other question is, what is going on with the parking for the residents of Santa Monica, like me, who want to use the stores along Wilshire Boulevard there? I'm very unhappy that the city is not planning on putting in public parking, because it was really unfortunate for the businesses along Wilshire to lose that. And my other question is, what has the city been doing with UCLA regarding parking? They own all of those huge lots. I believe they also own some of the property out near that 16th Street parking lot. So how is the city actually making any plans or discussing anything with UCLA as to their plan for building a public parking structure? And if they haven't, why haven't they been in discussion with UCLA? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think yeah, go ahead, Isla.
Thank you for your comment. So regarding UCLA, yes, the city has reached out to UCLA to inform them that this is, development of these lots is moving forward. We understand, based on a lot of feedback, that the 14th Street lot in particular is very impacted due to the hospital patients choosing to park there because it's cheaper than what UCLA charges. So we have spoken to them about their properties, and we've told them that we're looking to partner with them, but that we're interested in them kind of also doing their part to manage the flow of traffic generated by their patients and employee base. They do lease a lot of property along Wilshire, is what we've learned. They don't necessarily own all of it, and they do so they do lease parking from other property owners. So they don't necessarily control all the sites, but they do have some sites that they are reserving for employee parking and future development that's, been slated to happen for a few years, but got kind of sidetracked because of the pandemic. They have some long-term plans to add capacity as well as parking, for whatever it is that they are going to add. So, we are in touch with them. We've discussed with them also the potential for them to use shuttles to bring in folks from other areas of the city instead of having them come and park and use the lots. So, the city has reached out. We're aware of the issues. And, beyond that, the city is also exploring other options for replacement public parking. And, one potential option would be to look at street parking and see if there's any opportunities to accommodate more street parking in the area. But there's a lot of factors to consider, including vehicle safety, bicyclist and pedestrian safety, and whether it would even be physically feasible to do something like that, or look at the whole area and see if there are opportunities to manage the existing street parking better and more efficiently. We're not the first city to face these kinds of trade-offs between parking and housing. So perhaps there are models that haven't been tried before in Santa Monica that could be looked at. But ultimately, any changes like that would need to be at the direction and approval of City Council. But we're certainly aware of that issue.
Great, thank you. We'll now call on Jay Johnson, and then I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Marlea Walton. Jay Johnson?
Hi, good evening, everyone. We live on Euclid, just north of Wilshire Boulevard, across from the Vaughn's parking lot. We have bizarre behavior from homeless people virtually every day. It's been ongoing. On the Euclid Street building, can anyone answer us as to the makeup of the incoming tenants, as to whether they are all 100% Section 8, which we said is affordable, or whether some portion of them will be Section 8 persons, and the vetting? That's one question. Secondly, about Wilshire Boulevard itself, many people with commercial on both sides. There's a lot of people across the street outside of the crosswalks. Has any attention, and will any attention be given to enhancing the crosswalks and maybe some barriers to prevent pedestrians crossing the middle of the block? But crosswalks of highlighted, restriping, and the yellow flashing lights to enhance the pedestrian experience on Wilshire. And lastly, the third portion would be on the property manager, which according to the slide was 9 to 5 Monday, Friday. Our experience as landlords is that the problems with people in general happen at nights and weekends. And I would ask you to readdress the scheduling, basically starting later in the morning and going later at night, and at least coverage on Saturday in particular on your management, because things happen at strange hours. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll call on the question. There were 3 questions here. I think I'm just going to try and summarize, and I don't want to misspeak, but what I heard was questions about how the makeup of the incoming tenants, what's the vetting process? Are there plans for pedestrian safety on Wilshire, and then requests for property management on nights and weekends? And certainly from the city team or development team, please feel free to address those.
Yeah, this is Sarah, so I'll take the property manager question. I think that, Jay, I think it's a good idea, like starting later in the day and ending later in the day, and then working on Saturdays. So I could imagine, a schedule where they work Tuesday through Saturday. So yeah, we'll talk to, we now have a in-house property management, so we can make decisions like that. And I think it's a really good suggestion that we'll follow up on. I might defer to the city about the question about who will live at the Euclid property. We don't anticipate, there won't be any project-based Section 8, but if somebody is recommended, comes from the city list to move in there and they happen to have a Section 8 voucher, I suppose that's a possibility, but there won't be project-based Section 8 on the Euclid site.
Sarah, I can speak to this one. So I'm Natalie Verlanich, I'm the housing manager for the city. So for the Euclid site and for the 14th site for the general senior affordable units, they will be filled from our below market housing waitlist, which is a city administered waitlist that provides priority to Santa Monicans that live or work in the city. And those individuals and households that move in, they have to income qualify, and then the apartments are what's called deed restricted. So that means they're affordable because the rents are restricted to a certain limit based off of the income. And so, as Sarah mentioned, if an individual or a household who's coming off of the below market housing wait list has a Section 8 voucher, that can be utilized for their rental subsidies, but the general affordable units on Euclid do not have project-based vouchers.
And then
Great,
regarding the crosswalks, so generally the city makes kind of long-range plans related to things like pedestrian safety measures. And generally these are kind of planned capital improvements that Public Works or Department of Transportation, they get funding for those and kind of plan for those. Happy to pass that feedback along. It's possible that something like that may already be in the works, but regardless, happy to transmit that feedback. I think there's actually a study that's happening currently along the Wilshire corridor focusing on traffic safety. Jing, do you have any more information on that one?
Yeah, I can just add a little more information to that. So the city has a Vision Zero action plan, which is, there was the Wilshire corridor safety study was conducted. And if you Google Wilshire Boulevard safety enhancements, that'll take you to a website with more information in terms of the improvements that will be implemented on Wilshire Boulevard, specifically to address safety for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. The phase 1 improvements began, in 2023, and you probably see them all along Wilshire. They were completed in December 2023. There is a second phase of improvements, but you can check that website in terms of updates for the project. But that is something that that is being implemented as part of that safety study. We'll now move on to the next speaker, Marleya Walton, and then Esther Chung, you'll be after.
Hi, thank you so much. I've been living across from the Euclid Street parking for 25 years, and I've always loved the wide street and the quiet neighborhood. The first question is, I'm a little late comer to this. Thank heavens, one of my neighbors told me about this in August, so that was the first meeting. But I never heard about anything, and I do read the news kind of particularly about Santa Monica, and never heard anything in 2022 about this issue. That's my first question. Why didn't we know in 2022 when we would have had more time to plan? The second question is, how tall is the Euclid Street building? Is it still 8 stories or whatever? I can't remember what it was, but I'd like to know. And will this impact our property value? That's my third question.
Great, thank you.
So I guess I'll quickly say that the height of the Euclid property is 6 stories. For KDA, how many feet is that?
It's roughly 62 to 65 feet, depending on grade.
Okay, thanks. And then it shouldn't impact your property values. Studies have been done, Zillow data, lots of data showing that It's going to be a quality development and owned by a responsible landlord and operated by a responsible landlord. So it shouldn't impact property values. And lastly, I think the city maybe would answer the other question about 2020 decisions made back in 2022.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So as we indicated in the presentation, these sites across the city, the city-owned sites were discussed extensively as part of the housing element process. However, we recognize, as the process unfolded, it was during the COVID pandemic, and we didn't, all the outreach, obviously weren't able to do a lot of in-person consultation as we normally would have with a plan like that and the speed at which it had to be done. But we did the best we could, to put forth, an extensive public engagement process as part of the housing element. And, it was discussed at numerous council meetings. We held, workshops and working groups. They all had to be virtual by virtue of the pandemic. So we certainly
But
acknowledge.
I just wanted to say, though, that, I mean, my representatives are supposed to represent me. So, I would have liked a couple more months at least to do some planning, because as far as I can see, the Euclid Street hasn't changed much since when I joined in August. It's still the same.
Yeah, and I'm speaking to sort of like the site selection, the process by which these sites were released. Maybe the housing Isla, would you like to maybe address kind of that process by which the proposal was put out, and
Yeah.
that was more recent. Yeah.
Sure. So, so there were mailers that were sent out, and there was.
I never got anything.
So, yeah, I understand. Not everyone received the communication.
But I live across the street from the parking lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So in any event, we know that not, people are living their lives and they're not, going to find out about everything that happens, despite our efforts. But, we promise to stay in touch and keep you updated. Regarding the design, there is also an architectural review board meeting that will occur, which will be noticed as well, and we will make sure that you receive notice about that meeting that is specifically focused on design. So we'll make sure you're engaged with that process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Esther Chung, you're up next, and then after you will be Leslie Brothers.
Esther, can you please select unmute?
Sorry. So I live on Euclid Street, and in the last 4 years I've been living here, I must have paid close to $1,000 for parking violation, especially when you have street cleaning. Sometimes I drive around for 2-3 blocks trying to find a parking space. And then I find something that's like, 1 to 3 in the afternoon. Then I go, oh, that's good. And I park there. And then I forget that I parked there. And so I have received so many parking violation tickets. And I'm looking at the affordable housing plan, and there are 48 units, and I see 40 parking lots. And that means they're not even going to have enough parking spots for themselves. And now with current situation that I am in, then I am going to compete with these residents for parking spot, especially on the street cleaning day. So does city have any plans to mitigate parking issues on the street for people who need to park on the street?
Yeah, the city is going to, look at, other potential solutions for, managing the street parking better, so that, hopefully either if more spaces can be created, I don't know if that's feasible, or maybe the existing spaces managed better to allow more opportunities. I don't know. It's something that, we would need to city council direction, and, in order to change anything regarding the way street parking is managed and regulated. Regarding the on-site parking, maybe Hollywood Community Housing can speak to some of the considerations when it comes to providing resident parking, perhaps based on, their previous experience in other similar developments. But generally speaking, it's correct that the trend moving forward with all housing, not just affordable, but even, a lot of the market rate projects, is to include, less and less parking. That's, even state laws have changed to, make it harder for, cities to even require, developers of market rate developments to include parking on property that they own. So in general, that's kind of the challenge, moving forward. But perhaps specifically to this project, maybe that's something that Sarah can address.
Sorry, and then another question. So the housing project on Euclid and 14th Street, do you plan to start around the same time?
We anticipate starting the Euclid site first. There will be some overlap. We'll start the 14th Street second. And there will be some overlap. So it won't be sequential, but we'll start on Euclid. Euclid won't be done. We'll start on 14th Street, and then, so there's a little bit of overlap.
Yeah. So when you think about residents who are sort of sandwiched between Euclid and 14th Street, that's going to be very difficult.
I hear you. So all we do is urban infill. So we do our best. We do our best to be respectful of neighbors, and we're hoping the general contractor who's helping us do estimates of how much it will cost to build the building is Morley Benchmark, Morley Construction, and they have a subsidiary called Benchmark. They're very experienced building in Santa Monica. I spent 5 years at Community Corp of Santa Monica, and we hired them to do a lot of our urban infill projects. So I hear you that it does have an impact on the neighbors, but we really do our best to be respectful of the neighborhoods, comply with all the rules and requirements for mitigating impacts on neighbors, and only building during the specific hours we're allowed to, have the contractor working.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Leslie Brothers, and then after that will be Arlene Bell.
Hi, I'm going to just say by background that I thought the people concern is involved in some of the sort of social aspects of those people who need supportive housing, but I hear that they're not, and I see that they're not on the call. That's the background to what I want to say, which is I heard the business person who has the Rediscover Center was talking that near the Gramercy Place Apartments, was talking about the sense of safety and security. And as he was speaking about his business, it made me remember back to last summer. My daughter was taking my granddaughter to an art class in a neighborhood, and she was telling me that there was supportive housing for seniors, which should be pretty benign, but she said that there were a lot of very sketchy people around. And so she was talking about that over the summer. So while we were on this call, I texted her and I gave her that address of the Gramercy Place Apartments that you all gave for the open house. And I said, is that the same area where you were taking Isla, my granddaughter, for the art classes? And she said, yeah, it's the same place. She said there were sketchy drunks and drug addicts milling around. And she said, looked like prostitutes going in and out of the building. My daughter's a nurse, and so she's worked with people with behavioral issues. And she said, this is again from the text from this evening, she said, I thought it would be okay since it was for homeless elderly, but no. And so the reason I'm relaying this to you is because I'm very concerned about what level of support and supervision the people concerned is going to be providing in order to make sure that there isn't drug use taking place on these premises. Because just the fact that people are over 55 does not necessarily mean that they're not addicts. And I think when you introduce addicts into a neighborhood, you introduce the people they associate with, and you introduce crime. So that's my comment. And I guess my question is, where are the people from the people concerned to answer this?
They're here. The reason that we didn't list them as a presenter today is because nothing changed from the concept we presented in July, but John Masseri and Julie DeRose are both on the call, or on this call today. I don't know if John wants to answer your question. John, I don't want to put you on the spot, but two representatives from the people concerned are with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I'm happy to answer the question. Just for clarification, the people concerned doesn't provide supportive services at Gramercy Place. And in terms of our work in supportive services, we have staff that are on site and the building working closely with property management. There is a screening process for tenancy in the building. You heard the city describe the vetting process. Every resident goes through a background check as a requirement for tenancy. And every tenant, because this is permanent housing, every tenant has a lease, and there are very specific terms of the lease. And part of that is that there's, not to be drug sales or trafficking in the building, prostitution, any illegal activities would be a lease violation. And that's handled then through property management in coordination with the resident services team. So that's how we manage our buildings. I will say we have 3,400 units of permanent supportive housing throughout Los Angeles County. Work very closely with high acuity individuals who are medically complex and people living with mental health challenges as well as substance use challenges, and have been able to effectively provide supportive services in all of those properties. The fact that this is a senior building, the resident services will be targeted towards the needs of seniors, and we're not anticipating that there's going to be prostitution or drug sales or anything else that is going to jeopardize the tenancy or the safety of the residents or the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Arlene Bell, and then after you will be Laura Lee.
I'm trying to figure out how to unmute. Oh, okay.
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for letting me speak. I appreciate it. I know we're running late here. I'll try to make my comments brief, but I have some very, very serious concerns. And I'm actually more concerned now after hearing Mr. Masseri speak, because one of my concerns was that I've been following as much as possible whatever I can read about what's going on with these buildings. And a couple of months ago, I think, I read an article and it said some of this housing was going to be not just for low income, but for people who are homeless and needing mental health support, and that there was going to be mental health support embedded in these projects. And if I understood Mr. Masseri just now, he says they are providing some mental health support at the Gramercy location. And if that's true, I feel that there's a lack of transparency here of what's actually going to be going in on 13th and 14th Street. Also, I don't think the diagram that was shown earlier by Mr. Daly does not match what's there now. My father lives on that street. He lives about 3 doors down from that parking lot on Euclid, and I'm there almost every day. I could tell you exactly what's there now. And on the diagram, there's no evidence of the apartment building that's just to the south of that parking lot. And to the north of that parking lot are several small stores. On the corner is La Monarca Bakery. And all I saw on the diagram was a white building. So I don't know what's going to be there on either side of that new building on Euclid, what's going to be to the north and what's going to be to the south. And are you going to be tearing down the apartment building that's to the south of there? Because that did not appear on the diagram. And finally, my third comment is about parking, which has already been brought up. It is a severe problem there. It is severe problem. First of all, you can't even park on that street for a minute if you don't have a parking permit. So, you know, my father has had visitors run into his house to get a permit from him. And by the time they go back to their car to put the permit on the car, they've already gotten a ticket. I mean, it's outrageous. And I've circled around the block to find the place to park. So to take away the parking there is just outrageous. It affects the people that live there for their own parking, for their visitors, and for the stores that are there on Wilshire. So those are my three major concerns. And I don't know what the answers are. Thank you again for hearing me out.
Thank you so much. Would anyone on the development team like to address those questions or?
Well, I apologize for showing diagrams that may not have been as comprehensive as possible. No buildings are being torn down that are not part of these, you know, that are not part either of the existing city parking or the adjacent Petco. So no other buildings are going to be affected by this.
Thank you. And we'll move on to.
I just, sorry,
Isla.
if I could, I wanted to speak to the security issues. So I just wanted to clarify that when Sarah was describing the security requirements or the security, the night and weekend dedicated security for the first year. So that's a starting point. So, you know, we anticipate that these developments, the supportive housing will be, well run and well managed, in order to prevent the kinds of issues that folks have raised, and that folks will receive the services they need, to keep everyone stable and safely housed. In addition, beyond that, though, the sites will have, the 14th Street site will have night and weekend security for the first year. After the first year, the city and HCHC will, potentially will reassess based on the security needs and see if that needs to be adjusted. We'll be in contact with HCHC to, ensure that the security plan that they're required to provide to the city prior to, the city, agreeing to lease the property to them, will be adhered to. They're required to provide a security plan, which will outline, all the measures they're taking. We hear you, and certainly from the city side, we'll be doing our part to be responsive.
Thank you. We'll move on to Laura Lee, and then after Laura Lee will be Giacomo and Clara Valentini. Laura Lee.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. It's kind of a multi-part question. It all has to do with parking. First and foremost, I'm trying to clarify or get some clarification regarding a statement that was made about the council agreeing that there would be no underground parking, because that's not my recollection of the presentation that the council heard with the summary of the RFPs when they chose this development. So, but maybe I'm wrong. So could you clarify that?
Sure. So, so there was some discussion of parking options that were parking alternatives that were presented in the proposal. The council, did not provide any specific direction on that particular question.
But does that mean that that has been decided in finality, or is it still open to change?
So, at this point, one of the things that might be helpful to understand is, because of all the putting together all the financing that's required, essentially, if there were, to be any public parking replacement, it would really be at the cost of the city. So that's something that the council would need to weigh in on, whether it's, on-site or off-site. I will say that, at this stage, given all of the milestones that need to be reached in terms of finalizing the design, and, obtaining the council approval and going through the architectural review board, all these things need to occur before financing applications for all those financing sources that I mentioned can even be submitted. And so essentially, after the real, kind of major changes would kind of need to occur before these milestones happen. Otherwise, the development would essentially be delayed to, out years. So, at this point, there's not room for kind of major changes to the development application at this time. But I'm sure that options for replacement public parking will be, something that will continue to be discussed.
Well, I don't think that's what we've all heard all along these processes, and I don't think that's what the council voted on at that meeting, because it was presented that for 5.5 million, underground parking could be added to both buildings at 14th and Euclid Street. So we're eliminating 100 parking spots on the surface, and we're adding 130 residents in the same one block area. And so that's, simple math, and I'm not a mathematician, that's 230 per possible cars, right? That's just on the surface. Where are these people going to park? How are they going to shop at the businesses in the area? I don't understand this as a solution, and I don't think the council had any idea that their decision to move forward with the ENA, which is an exclusive negotiating agreement, was to take parking and the possibility off the table. Sorry, I don't think that's what the public's been told, and I don't think that's what the council understood, but I can't speak for them.
And Laura Lee, let me just clarify. So when this went for the ENA, council didn't give us direction either way. It was discussed, but there wasn't direction that council provided city staff. So during this exclusive negotiating agreement period, staff has been reviewing and assessing, and we continue to do those assessments on replacement public parking for when we do take this to city council, for them to ultimately make the decision for discussion. And so the comments we're hearing tonight, as well as what's been provided before tonight as well, is something we're taking into consideration as we're reviewing the various options.
I appreciate that, Natalie. Thank you. But I still think it's been very confusing. You're saying both things from this computer. I was gonna say from the dais, but you're not on a dais. So you're saying that council still has the ability to change that component of the project. Is that correct?
What we're saying is that it's ultimately up to city council approval for the public replacement parking of whether or not city funds are to be used for that replacement parking.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Laura Lee. Giacomo and Clara Valentini, and then after you will be Gary.
Okay, so I wanted to add my voice about the parking. I personally don't use a car, but I just want to point out that at the moment on Wilshire Boulevard, that stretch of Wilshire Boulevard, half the stores are boarded up, are closed, and there's already a dramatic parking situation. So assuming that one day there'll be some economic revival in the area, the parking needs will become more dramatic than they are already. So that should be taken into account. Second thing, very quickly, was about the permanent supportive housing. I don't know if there's any procedure envisaged for neighborhood members of the public who are living nearby to contact the property manager in order to highlight security situations that they might be perceiving. I think if there were something like some kind of feedback process that would help make everybody feel, safer, that they can actually, make their point heard somehow.
Can I take the second one? So we'll be the property management company, and our managers are they hope to get to know all the neighbors better. And they always get to know the community resource office, whoever's, the beat, whoever is responsible. This is part of their beat. But I just want to say that it's highly likely that if somebody asks for the on-site manager's number or business card, they will provide it. And so, yes, they are, on the clock from, 40 hours a week. But they're absolutely available because things come up all the time. It could be a powder outage in the neighborhood. It could be the sprinklers go off in the building causing water damage. Like, our staff is well trained to be responsive, not only to events that happen in the building, but they're also responsive to when neighbors reach out and they want to talk because they're concerned about a security issue. I think I'd also like to point out the fact that one on-site manager will be on Euclid and there will be 2 managers on 14th Street. They're really quite close together. So our team would back each other up in terms of coverage for nights and weekends. So I think you'll be satisfied at the end of the day that you'll have a phone number and you're going to be able to speak to somebody if there's something you want to talk about, something that's concerning you.
And I can address the parking question. So we will take your feedback. We appreciate it. And then, as mentioned before, options for public parking will be is continuing to be assessed by city staff and will be presented to city council when the development returns for approval for the deal terms.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Giacomo and Clara. Gary, you are next. And then after you will be Hoffman. Oh, Patricia Hoffman, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate a couple things. One was the parking, and Arlene Bell said earlier, there is no parking on Euclid. There's no parking in that area. Laura Lee mentioned that there's 100, I don't remember exactly, but basically of a 200 unit swing in parking, and there's already no parking in the area. And you're going to put 48 apartments on Euclid Street, which is what, 48 cars, maybe 100 cars? How many people are living there? I don't think this has been thought out well at all. And it's hard enough to even have a guest come to your home on Euclid Street now, as opposed to when this is going to go in. Where's all the cars going to go? Are they going to have to park 6 blocks away? They're going to have to take an Uber from Santa Monica Airport to come visit? I just don't understand. And the other thing that was mentioned earlier, and maybe this can be addressed by one of the team, which was in the last call, this is going to be for nurses, firemen, police people that need to live in the area because it's too expensive for their salaries. And it was also about the elderly. And in this call now, it's about possibly unemployed or Section 8. So I'm not sure what the whole story is on the residents that you're looking at to put in this community. Maybe you can help explain that to me, because every meeting, it seems to change like the weather. I don't see a fixed answer to any of this. It's constantly changing. And it's very annoying for the fact that you're going to have construction going on for what, 2 years? And you still want me to park outside my house? And it's just not very well thought out. Are there no other properties south of Santa Monica Boulevard? Is there anything around the airport? There's a lot more property owned by Santa Monica than just these 2 locations. So why aren't they used?
So I'll take the second question. During community meetings, there were a handful of people that referenced the importance of providing housing for nurses, teachers, firefighters, police. And there were a handful of people that talked about the importance of serving seniors. And at the end of the day, Euclid is, as we've always described it, which is family-sized units. And for the general population, we can't really differentiate based on employment, what their job happens to be. So we've always presented the Euclid site as family housing. And then for the site on 14th Street, that's one of the changes we're talking about today, which is to dedicate the 14th Street site to serving seniors.
And I'll also add, Gary, as well. Thank you again for the comments on the parking. And I'll just reiterate again that, staff is definitely taking feedback and the comments, and we're making notes, especially tonight and especially beforehand as well. And so as we're assessing, the parking, we'll also present those to City Council for the approval when the development goes back for approval. And additionally, I also just want to highlight that the below market housing wait list, which is utilized for this development as well as many developments within the city, it is for Santa Monicans that live and work in the city, which does include many of those populations that you identified as well. So I just want to highlight that as well. And then additionally, for your other comments regarding other city-owned sites in the city, I think Jing, or is it Kristen, could you go back to the slide?
Slide 8.
Slide 8, thank you. In the housing element, the city did identify 5 sites that are throughout the entire city. And the first development or city-owned site that has been going through this process under the housing element is located 1318 4th Street, which is former parking structure 3. Council just approved the deal terms for that in October. And this is the second one, and we'll be moving forward with the third city-owned site later next year in commitment, in the same or similar fashion as due to our housing element obligation. So I also just want to highlight that there are other sites that are city-owned that are also being utilized in accordance with our housing element obligations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Hoffman, you are next, and then Lisa Jimenez, you'll be after that.
Hi. I agree that parking is a serious issue and should be looked at carefully, and that I'm at that age that is too old and unbalanced to ride a bicycle and too young to not drive at all. And so I think that it is something we should pay attention to. And I was wondering, well, let me first tell you, both Sarah and Kevin, that I think you've done a remarkable job, that between each of your sessions, the changes that you've brought in response to what the community is asking have been so positive and so responsive. And it's rare that a builder is able to do that. And there are so many more meetings for affordable housing than there are for market rate housing. And the fact that you've been as responsive as you've been able to be, I really appreciate. But then I was also wondering if you have looked into any car sharing models for the residents of your buildings, and if you could perhaps find ways that make it so that the residents are able to get around without putting as much impact on the neighborhood as a lot of the neighbors are afraid of, without realizing that affordable housing actually uses fewer parking spaces per unit than market rate housing does, that you're not likely to have a resident who has 2 cars like you do with market rate tenants. So thank you. And thank you again for being so responsive.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, and we are trying to be responsive. So I hear you on the car share. We'll do some research. And the Euclid site does have 21 one-bedroom apartments. So it's currently 48 units total, 40 parking spaces, and 21 of those apartments are one-bedroom units. So we were thinking that the Euclid site was going to be adequate parking for that building. But we will look at the car share model. And Kevin also had an idea for a bike share model, so we might actually revisit that. And then on the 14th Street site, with 40 of the apartments for people who've experienced homelessness or at risk of homelessness, and I know that a lot of people do have cars. They may have been living in their car before moving into an apartment. So on that site, I believe we have 42 units for the building. So we've roughly parked it at, almost half, because it's an 82 unit building. So we'll look at that. We hear you from so many people tonight. We've heard about concerns about parking. Yeah, so I don't have an answer for you tonight, but we will continue to see if there's a better way to address the range of parking needs, from existing residents to businesses to visitors to the hospital to our residents. So
Thank you. Lisa Jimenez, you are next, and then after will be the market. And I just want to make sure that we have a chance to hear questions from everybody tonight. So Laura Lee, I know you're on your second question. I'm going to call NH just before you, just because we want to make sure that we hear from as many people tonight as we can. So Lisa Jimenez, you are next.
Yeah, thank you. I know there's been a lot of discussion already about parking. So definitely a concern of mine. I live right across the street from the Euclid parking lot. And the parking is utilized very often during the day. There are times where I've seen cars just driving around because they can't find parking. But I guess my kind of question is, it seems like, even I think this was mentioned earlier, that the city is, I want to say, rushing to get these developments in. I know there's a state requirement, but I just feel like there's some decisions being made just quickly because it has to get done. So, and that might not necessarily be helpful for the quality of living of the neighborhood, for not only the existing neighbors, the businesses, but also the people that are moving into these spaces where, we're all saying, is it really fair for them not to have a parking spot and then have to, fight with everybody on the street? But with that said, have there been any actual studies on the parking usage, how often they're utilized, and traffic? Because this is a lot of units in just a very, they're just one street away from each other, and these streets off of Wilshire, it's already very crowded. So is somebody actually doing a study to say, is this the appropriate amount of units for this neighborhood? Or is it potentially going to cause some congestion that really is just going to be, detrimental to the area?
So I can speak to a parking study. So the city has data, or I should say the machines that are used when people come in and pay for parking. Those machines generate data that the city can analyze. A parking study is being conducted in terms of looking at demand, not just in these 3 lots, but in other lots in the city. So that is information that the city, will have to review and bring forward along with the parking discussion when we go to council, to give, council a sense of kind of where we are right now with demand. As far as larger traffic study, perhaps Jing can speak to that with regards to the housing element.
Yeah, so as part of the housing element, a whole citywide level environmental impact report was conducted, analyzing, as I indicated, the tens of thousands of housing units that we were required by the state to study as part of the housing element, and all of the potential environmental impacts, including potential traffic impacts were studied as part of that EIR for the housing element. So the number of units, that are being proposed here and across the city-owned sites were part of that EIR that was completed.
Okay, thank you for that. Just to follow up on the parking, if the study is being conducted and the results are coming from the parking meter, I mean, I would say for something that's this, significant to the neighborhood and to the businesses, I would assume a proper study is needed, because we know there are many people who park in those lots and they do not pay. So I would imagine that those parking receipts are probably much less than actual usage. And as I said, I live right across from the Euclid Street lot, and I see people all the time going and, parking and then not paying, or parking right in front of, right across the street and going into Ulta quickly. I mean, every single day I see somebody without a permit who just parks there to go to the businesses. So I would just say that as a resident who has a visual of the parking lot, just to say we're reading the receipts, I don't think is really going to tell the whole story. The other question that I have is, what if the city has met with the businesses, the local businesses that are surrounding these lots, and how have those discussions gone? Have they been able to relay their concerns and their needs to make sure that this neighborhood, is still able to thrive for these businesses?
Yeah, so I believe as part of the outreach for these meetings, the development team went door to door flyering, prior to the first meeting, and spoke to some businesses at that time, as well as sent, the mailers and emails to folks who have business licenses in this area, including for tonight's meeting. Some business owners have attended the previous meetings and talked about the impact that they anticipate this would have on their business, but there's certainly room to look into how to further engage business owners.
Is there a plan pending?
So, we'll absolutely look into that for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Up next is the market. And then after, Laura Lee, I do see you in the queue. And then after the market, there will be NH.
Hi, my name is Kyle, actually, not the market, but
oh, okay. Sorry.
No, yeah, it's the business my name's under. But I have two quick questions. The first one is there any chance in either of these buildings that we're going to get a harm reduction needle exchange program at any time now or in the future in those buildings? And the second one has to do with the eligibility for the permanent supportive housing. I read that one of the qualifications is just merely being a high user of Santa Monica City services. And with the way people can get here on the train and stuff, that kind of seems like a loophole that jumps any list for eligibility for these buildings, and kind of opens it up to the whole city versus just our community.
I can speak to,
Is that true, I guess, is my question, yeah.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So, we have what's called the Santa Monica priority population, and it's true that being a high utilizer of city services can qualify for that. And so, Isla, do we have a slide about the eligibility that we could show?
Yeah, I believe it should be after this one. So yeah, this talks about eligibility.
Yeah, so we have, people that can meet the criteria of residents that have lost housing or at risk of losing housing in Santa Monica. They've been unhoused in Santa Monica for 5 or more years. They're working in Santa Monica at the time they became homeless, or they're high utilizers of city services. But that high utilizers of city services means it's, especially with the senior population, it can be individuals that have high health issues, which results in multiple reoccurring calls from fire or PD, specifically, with this older population as well. So that, that's something to consider as well. And we also, the individuals that are moving into the supportive housing go through a very long process to ensure that they're ready for independent living. There's also a background check that is done through the housing authority side, and it's close collaborations between TPC, the service providers, and the housing authority in city staff to ensure that that they're really ready for independent living.
Thank you. NH, you are next, and then after you will be Ramana.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much. I have a couple questions. First of all, so I heard from neighbors that the Laurel on Michigan, that what do you call it? The PSH building that John Masseri, who's on here, manages. I heard that they do needle exchange in the building. Are you going to do that here in these buildings? And then my second question is, a friend of mine lives right near the Laurel building, and she told me that there was a huge uptick in police calls to her neighborhood after the Laurel opened. So I'd really like for you to speak honestly on that. And then finally, the criteria stuff, I'm pretty confused. So I'd like you to clarify. The or of it is pretty confusing because it seems like there's like a loophole where you can just be a high user of city services. Like you don't actually have to be a resident of Santa Monica. Like if you're just a high user of city services, you qualify, because the or makes it you can that works, right? So like I guess my question is it true, like a person who doesn't live in Santa Monica, because of that, like if I'm reading the criteria right, like the or of it, like that means they can qualify to live in these buildings, right?
So I'm sorry, I can address the question about needle exchange. There is no needle exchange program at the Laurel, and there will be no needle exchange program in any of these buildings. So that information, unfortunately, is just not accurate. As far as an increase in police calls, I'm not aware. The Laurel building is opened fairly recently. The lease up has been happening, and within the last
Yeah, no, I'm
month or
sorry. A
two.
council member told me that he's like saw a poster in the elevator about needle exchange in the building.
There is no needle exchange in the building. So I don't know what information you have, but there's no needle exchange in the building.
And then for the high utilizer of city services, it is an or, but again, these are individuals who are homeless in Santa Monica who are high utilizers of city services that typically are a result of them being homeless in Santa Monica and needing, like, example for the senior population, needing health care that because of their status, they're utilizing city services to, address that.
Thank you. Ramana, you are next. And then after Mary Lovebug and me, owner, you're going to be after her.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So one of the things that I read in the proposal for this initially is regarding the lease terms. And it was $1 per year for over 60 years for both of these sites. And as I recall, the terminology was that the projects could not proceed without these favorable terms for the lease. And my question is, where all of a sudden are you getting the money to now purchase a whole separate building if you require essentially the land for free? Thank you.
That would be a question for the development team.
Sure. Yeah. So interestingly, it was a little bit expensive to build the site on 16th Street because, as Kevin mentioned, it's a small site, like 50 feet wide. There were a lot of constraints. And the design for the 14th Street site is very efficient. And so there were some cost savings by building a bigger building on 14th Street and not developing the 16th Street site. So it's basically a wash. It doesn't increase total development costs when you include the acquisition costs because it's offset by some real efficiencies by combining the Petco site with the 14th Street parking lot. Does that answer your question?
I think you, oh, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that does answer my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Mary Lovebug and me, you are next, and then after you will be Patty Johnson.
Hi, yes, I am the owner of Lovebug and Me. We are at 1201 Wilshire. We've been there for about 18 months now and love the neighborhood so much. Thank you to everyone for having this meeting, and thank you so much for all the residents who have spoken up about parking and also just the needs for small businesses in the area. We appreciate you all so much. We are too concerned about parking, but I did want to just say out loud that we welcome any contact with you in terms of, you know, furthering this conversation around small businesses in the area. I was happy to get this invite for this meeting, but I don't think we had any other sort of contact by anyone about these projects. So just wanted to verbalize that and thank everyone so much.
Thank you for being here tonight. Patty Johnson, you're next, and then Laura Lee, we're going to come back to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm in the car picking up my son. Actually, that's kind of one of the concerns I have. I live right on Arizona and Euclid, and parking. Oh, I've lived there for over 20 years, and there's been an uptick in parking, and I sometimes cannot find parking in my neighborhood. So I'm really concerned about the parking, as are many others. I have 3 kids, and we do have 2 cars because my husband and I both work. We have to get our kids to school, to sports, to, you know, concerts, because they play instruments. And so come home and leave to pick up another kid. So that's one. They're listening to us about this and trying to address it. My other concern is the overlap in construction of the 2 buildings, because just, you know, in picking up my kids today, I have one in elementary school, one in middle school, one in high school. I was late to all of them because there was construction. There was the train that, you know, goes through the city, which has caused backups. There's construction at my child's elementary school. There's construction on Lincoln Boulevard of those 2 huge buildings. And there's other construction around, and it's just, we are a small city, and it makes just getting around town almost impossible. Like, just to pick up my kids, I'm late because I can't get from one school to the other on time because even the schools don't have enough parking. You know, we get ticketed because we try to double park to go run and get our kids. So what is, you know, I really want to make sure that I understand that you're mindful of it, but it's frustrating when you're trying to run, you know, around, pick up your kids. You just come home from school, you know, you are trying to get to work, and you can't even get around the city and get home to rest. And even if when you get home, you're not going to have a place to park. So I'm really, really like worried about this. That's it.
Thank you for your comment. You know, as we indicated earlier with respect to other comments for parking, you know, that is being assessed. Public parking options, you know, around this proposal are being assessed and will be brought forward for the council's consideration when the project returns for approval. So, again, we want to reiterate that we're hearing loud and clear, about those concerns, and those are being assessed as part of this. And Laura Lee, you appear to be our last question of the evening.
Great. I just had a question for Mr. Daly about the aesthetics of the building. As they're shown in those diagrams, are those realistic of the aesthetics and the colors, or is some of that going to be decided later?
Well, they're kind of diagrammatic to show the scale of the project more than anything. And the project will have a huge amount of development between now and when it actually gets underway.
Because some buildings that I've seen in town, there's one on 14th Street, maybe it's the Laurel, that has like a wooden siding look versus a metallic industrialized look. I mean, are those finishing things up for discussion and debate, or are those set?
Well, there are a lot of design decisions that have not been set yet.
Okay. And then just a side comment, although it is still about parking, I can guarantee you that our neighborhood would rather put up with 2.5 months of noise to build underground parking than an eternity without parking.
Thank you. And Ramana, and I just kind of just aware of the time, it is 8 o'clock, and I'm seeing sort of people starting to maybe leave the meeting. So just want to maybe just do a final call for questions. If you want to do that again, please use the raise hand feature. We do want to make sure that if you have a question tonight, we want to answer it. Ramana, go ahead.
Yeah, really quick question. Where is the recording of this meeting going to be available? I missed that information.
Yeah, sure. Kristen, can you go to that last slide, please? There's the website. So the recording and the presentation, so this presentation that you're seeing, this PowerPoint, will be posted to www.santamonica.gov/housing-news. So that's the website you see there. Okay.
Oh, and Jane, I'll also,
yes,
sorry, apologies. I'll also add too that there'll be a link on hchcsantamonica.org going to that recording as well, to the city website as well. So if you can't find the city website, you can also go to the development website as well.
Thank you, Natalie. Red Coy, and then Mary.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, we can hear you.
Wanted to see the last HCHC Zoom meeting has never been posted. Can we get that posted as well?
I'll let the development team. I assume, was it recorded or?
Yes, there was we have to check with our tech person. One of the 2 meetings, because there was one in, are you talking about the July meeting?
I would like all the meetings with HCHC posted that were on Zoom. Please.
Okay. I think we had a technical glitch. We told people we were recording them, and I need to get back to you with an answer. It's possible there was a technical glitch, and yeah. Our team is telling me there was a technical glitch.
Of course. And just a side note, it would be great from now on to the city of Santa Monica that this was all done in person. The neighborhood would like it all to be done in person. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary, it looks like you're probably our last question of the evening.
Yes, so sorry. There's one thing I forgot to mention, and I'm not even sure if this is the proper forum for it, but just about crime, the rising crime and, unhoused population. My car literally was stolen from the Euclid parking lot, that very parking lot, about 6 weeks ago. And, it was just really shocking to me. You know, I always felt like this such a great neighborhood, but just noticing even in the, you know, 18 months that I've been there as a business owner, the amount of crime, and then that I was affected personally by it. So just, you know, echoing the need for security. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So going back, it looks like we can post the May recorded meeting, but there was the technical glitch affected the July recorded meeting. So we'll post the May meeting.
So the May meeting will be posted, but not the July one.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And that, again, that'll be on the hchcsantamonica.org website. Again, I don't see any further questions or raise hands in the queue. I just want to do one last call before we, Soon Chung,
Yes,
please.
I'm a resident here in Santa Monica on Euclid Street. Why do you always have Zoom meetings? Why can't we have in person? I don't understand why Zoom is preferred. Are you trying to hide something?
I can speak to that. So there have been I don't know if you're speaking kind of generally for city meetings or for this meeting today in particular, but
This meeting, I'm talking about this meetings
yeah.
are very hidden. I feel like it's under the radar, so no one knows. Why can't you be more open about things? Zoom seems to be, you know, we're suspicious too. If you can mute someone, you can deny someone to enter a Zoom call. And so I don't know why you're doing Zoom meetings. We don't have COVID anymore.
Yeah, so thanks for your feedback on that. So when we looked at, you know, the last set of meetings we had in person and virtual, and there were nearly twice as many people who participated on the virtual. So we thought virtual might be more convenient for people and might be a way to, you know, get more people to participate rather than having to come down physically and be somewhere. But we take your feedback and appreciate it and understand.
Can you have a balance? If you feel that there's more virtual, can you have at least some in-person meetings? So, as I recall, there was only one, rest are Zoom.
Yeah, we can, we'll certainly take that feedback and appreciate you letting us know.
Thank you.
Lisa Jimenez, you're next, and then Red Coy.
Thank you. Just going back to the list of who qualifies for the housing, I think I was still a little unclear. We see the list, we see that there's it's one of the following criteria. So how is it actually determined who gets these units? I mean, because of this list, there's several criteria, but how do you decide between these criteria?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So are you speaking, Lisa, specifically to the supportive housing or to all the housing in general?
I mean, I guess all the housing in general, but specifically, I know a question that's come up several times is the fact that one of their criteria could just be high utilizers of city services. So one, I guess, is there, you know, a threshold for, okay, what type of services and how many services, but is there anyone on any points of this list that would be priority over somebody else? Or like, how do you go about the selection process to say who of these individuals get housing?
Yeah, I can definitely answer that. So I'll speak to the general, what we can call it general affordable housing. So those are being leased from the below market housing wait list, which is a wait list that anyone right now can apply to, and it's utilized for majority of the affordable units within the city, which includes also inclusionary units within market rate housing. And those, you know, as individuals are on the list, they're referred to apartments and residences that meet not only their household income size, but also ensuring that they can afford it based off of their income level. So there's, I'll call it like a matching process that's part of that. On the supportive housing side, because these are filled or being utilized with what's called project-based vouchers from the Housing Authority, there's first is a Housing Authority wait list specifically for supportive housing units. But then there's this tier of those that live or work in the city and also includes meeting one of these criterias. And as I mentioned before, it's a long lease up process, much longer than a normal affordable process, in that we're working with the service provider, we're working with TPC, and we're ensuring that the individuals that are referred and on the wait list are actually able to live independently in this type of environment. And they need to be, document ready so that they're able to meet the qualifications of the Santa Monica Housing Authority, which those are governed by federal requirements from HUD. And so they need to be able to meet those thresholds, as well as also clear background check as well.
Okay, but in terms of these criteria, the 4 criteria, does one carry more weight than the other?
No, one does not carry more weight than the other, but again, the individuals and the households that are moving into supportive housing need to show or need to demonstrate that they're able to live independently on, within this type of environments.
And are these lists, I know they have that criteria they need to meet, but is it just kind of whoever signed up first? Like I could just imagine, I mean, we know the need outweighs availability. So that's, again, going back to just wondering how individuals are selected.
Yeah, so again, both the below market housing wait list and the Section 8 wait list, anyone can apply for those, but those, each of those have tiers that have priorities that are for individuals that in households, that live or work in Santa Monica. And so that would be applied to both of those.
Okay. Thanks, Natalie.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Red Coy, you're next, and then Patty Johnson.
So just to follow up on what Lisa was saying and what Soon was actually saying, I think Ayala Scott referred to the fact that the last time there was a Zoom call, there seemed to be a lot of people on the call, which was kind of an excuse because most of the people on that call were not our neighbors who live and are impacted either across the street or 750 feet away from the project. And tonight I see quite a few people who are not our neighbors as well. That's why it was very important for us as a neighborhood to be able to have an in-person meeting with neighbors that are 750 feet away from this project who should have a voice here. And so that is why we have been very sensitive to that. And it seems as though a political PAC wrote a letter about our neighborhood and was on and encouraged people to flood our call in July on the HCHC call. And I don't know why a political action committee or lobbyists and activists are on our call. That seemed pretty out of place and kind of diluted all of the actual neighbors who had anything to say or had any skin in this. And secondly, I guess I'm really confused because basically what you're saying is high utilizers of city services can float to the top. It can be a tiered system, but so who makes this decision? Because a high utilizer of city services can be somebody who is really, really ill and needs a lot of help. And what you're trying to sort of say is they can just be housed in a neighborhood. And we're very worried about how that impacts our security, our neighborhood in general. And we've got a lot of children in this neighborhood. So, you know, I think safety is a real big issue here. And it seems like a loophole in the system. So it doesn't even need to be a Santa Monica resident, technically, right, Natalie? Somebody who is not a Santa Monica resident who happens to be a high utilizer of city services moves to the top. So can you say genuinely that these people aren't going to be moved in to these buildings?
So thank you for your feedback and comment, and you know, we can take those in. I think if we could maybe move to the slide was after that initial one about who can qualify. Yeah. So I think first I just want to address the first comment that you had regarding the in-person versus virtual. You know, we'll definitely take the feedback and the comments for moving forward, but I also just want to reiterate that we had 2 in-person meetings and also 2 virtual meetings as well prior to this one. And you know, as a city meeting, this is not only for the neighborhood and the community, but also we also want to hear from anyone that might also potentially qualify to move in as well. So that was something that we're balancing as well. In terms of your second question or comment, you know, these are the individuals that cannot move in, you know, that are, you know, screened and looked at. And, you know, I just want to provide a clarification in that, you know, the individuals who are moving into the supportive units, they're, you know, first they're pulled from a coordinated entry with the city, and then they apply for the voucher. So, but again, it's a long process that we're working with the social services provider, TPC, city staff, to ensure and screen to make sure that the individuals that are moving in are truly ready to move in independently.
When you say a long process, what do you mean? How long does it take?
I can speak to the most recent lease up that we did, and I would say that, you know, I think it was over 8 months process, and sometimes in certain cases it might have even been a year.
I think I heard 60 days from.
That was their documents, but we were working with social services providers to identify and, you know, coordinate the system for much longer than 60 days.
And these people don't have to be clean, technically.
That, if you're referring to, like, that can't be a requirement. On state funding requires a housing first model, and that we can't use as a requirement.
So someone who's a current IV drug user and isn't clean can move into our neighborhood, is what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that, you know, that can't be a requirement, similar to any other, you know, apartment within the city. That can't be a requirement.
That's too bad.
Thank you. Patty Johnson. And then NH.
Yes, so I'm not driving anywhere, so I'm going to try to make a more coherent question about my concern about just the impact that the overlap of building 2 large scale units or buildings so close to each other. I just, you know, if it's going to be a short-term thing, and like Laura Lee said, you know, we may get some parking out of it, it's something I think that we would be willing to put up with. But, you know, I guess my question is, what's that impact, you know, that you're going to have on the residents is going to be worthwhile or well thought out, so that it has minimal impact on us. That's one thing. And then my second point is, actually I have been on that wait of yours, the median income, for years, and it is such an opaque and frankly I think not managed very well. I've lived in Santa Monica my entire life, and I still have yet to get an apartment. I never know. Sometimes I get notified, sometimes I don't, and I'm frankly just tired of having to complete the same application where you scrutinize everything about my income and nothing happens. I don't get anything. To someone that doesn't even live here, that just maybe happens to work here, or I mean, God knows. I really don't know, and it's been such a frustrating process. Frankly, to be a lifetime resident here, and to be not even given priority for some of these units that have come up. It's been really, really frustrating. Myself and my sister, she's applied. She finally moved out of the state because she could, she just kept getting rejected. Her, it was she made too little. Me, at times it was I made too much. I just frankly don't know what it's like Goldilocks. You have to be just right, and you never know if you're going to get it. It almost doesn't feel worth the trouble of completing something because you're going to give it to someone that's not even a resident of Santa Monica. So I guess I'm sorry, I am venting, I'm frustrated. And now to add insult to injury, we can't get off the wait list, and you're going to build more units, give to people that they're not from here. And we're just going to have to suck it up and not have parking and just deal with it and deal with the congestion. So if you can talk to really how your list really works and have more transparency there, and also just talk about how you're going to mitigate the impact on the community for this construction.
I can speak to the wait list, and Patty, if you want to connect with me kind of offline, I can have some staff just look to see your application to see, that make sure it is on the below market housing wait list. Because I'll provide just a little bit of background. Previously, before I believe it was 2021, 2020, the city didn't have a city administered wait list, and it was, either CCSM had their own develop or wait list, or every individual development had their own wait list. And what we were seeing was that essentially those lease ups, when they were happening, it wasn't always going to those individuals that lived or work in the city. It was usually about 50%, sometimes more, sometimes less, weren't going, those units or apartments weren't being leased to Santa Monicans that lived or worked in Santa Monica. So in 2020, we brought in all of the wait lists. So it was a city administered wait list, and it's a system we're always looking to improve. But essentially what we've been seeing is in our newer developments that have come out of it, 97, more than 90% of those apartments are now being leased to Santa Monicans that live or work in the city. And so that's something that, we're really working to, streamline and work that system. The challenge is a lot of these deed restricted units do have, you have to meet a certain income level, which, can affect it. But how the wait list works, the below market one, is that it pairs individuals and households only to apartments that, based off of their application, which they can, should and can revise, it's like a live application that not only meets their household size, but also meets what their income is as well. So that's a process we're working in. I'm happy to talk with you offline if you want to share additional feedbacks on that. And then,
Great, thank you, Natalie. Oh, and it may be helpful. I can address maybe just sort of like construction period impacts. So what the city requires for really all construction projects in the city is something called a construction management plan, and that exists specifically to deal with projects and their impacts on the public right of way. So they look at impacts to, sometimes there's like sidewalk or street closures for that. All of that is reviewed by our mobility Division and Public Works to ensure that it is appropriate and, minimizes convenience to the greatest extent feasible, during that construction period. So, these projects will be required to submit the construction management plan for review by city staff to ensure that those impacts are mitigated to the greatest extent possible. Let's see where we're at right now. Looks like NH, you were next, and then Esther. Esther, looks like you're going to be our last question of the evening.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I have 2 follow-up questions, and I really like them both answered. The first is, if you could please just answer this. You haven't answered it, and people here tonight have asked it a couple of different times. So just to be clear, yes or no, can a homeless individual who hasn't lived in Santa Monica very long at all technically qualify to live in one of these units, sorry, based on this whole high user of city services? Please just answer the question, yes or no. And then my second question is that the recording of the July meeting that a PAC overran with their people, that recording is missing. Is that correct?
The July recording, that's correct. And I can't remember what the technical issue was. We did, what was it? I can't remember what the technical issue was.
We converted incorrectly from Zoom because it was a long meeting and it takes quite a while for it to convert and then go to a correct file sharing space. But we will continue to look into it to make sure nothing can be salvaged, or to make sure that see if there's a possibility.
And then my first question.
Apologies. Yeah, so for the high utilizer, it's one of the qualifying ones, but again, it's off of.
So the answer is yes?
But it's,
I'm trying to be clear, yes or no?
Yes, but it's for, it's based off of, it could be medical services, it could be a whole host of things. And again, they have to be able to demonstrate that they can live independently.
But they don't have to have lived in Santa Monica for very long. Like, that's no part of it, right?
I believe it's a 6-month period that it's based off of, and they do have to be homeless in Santa Monica.
Wait, for what? For 6 months?
Again, it's based off of, the number of calls for certain services. So it's not the 5-month or 5-year period, excuse me, but they do have to be in Santa Monica.
So you just have to live here for 6 months and then you get free housing?
No, it's based off of whether or not they're free. It's not free housing because, again, these are leases and there is a minimum rent that's associated with it. And then they have to be a high utilizer of city services. So again, it could be medical, it could be a whole host of, city services that, are tied with being homeless.
And I think I'll just say, I think the thinking behind the high utilization is that it incurs a lot of cost to the city to respond with, police, fire, ambulance.
Right, but that means you're going to choose people who haven't lived here, who only lived here for 6 months, over residents of Santa Monica.
Oh, it's one of the factors, but there's
like who've been here for like a very long time, like 6 months versus a very long time.
Yeah, we hear you, and we'll take the feedback, and it's only one of the considerations. There's a whole host of, there's the 4 other, there's the other qualifiers as well, that go into determining, who's pulled.
Right, but your thing said you only need to qualify for one, so like that gets you in 6 months. You're in.
Good. Hi, this is Heather Averick. I'm the Director of Housing and Human Services. Sorry to interject here, but I want to clarify because I think 2 different components are getting conflicted. So the live or work priority relates to the general affordable units. The Santa Monica Priority Program relates to individuals who are experiencing homelessness. So I just want to clarify that, because I hear your concern of, wait, someone who's been living in our city forever and has been on this wait list, they're going to be bumped because of someone who may or may not be a high utilizer of city services. And the answer to that is no, because we're talking about two separate populations. So the population, as Natalie was outlining
But
earlier,
like Lisa said earlier, that like there's no like which one goes, like there's no hierarchy. So like this doesn't seem very thought out.
well, so there is a hierarchy here. So that's what I'm trying to clarify, is that there are two different systems in place
Right, but
for
this
the
housing could
affordable
be
versus
going,
the supportive housing.
sorry to interrupt, but I've lived here for a decade. Like this housing could be going to people who aren't from here. Like it's not going to the community.
When you talk about this housing, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question. Are you speaking specifically to the supportive housing apartments, or are you speaking generally to the entire development?
To the supportive housing.
Okay, so for the supportive housing, there is also a criteria, and the way that it works is that we have a internal city registry service list, and that contains individuals who are SMPP, and then they're also ranked based on a variety of other factors. So they have to be able to live independently. And for example, someone who has a lot of health issues and is probably more at risk of dying on our streets than someone maybe who's been here, to your point, for 6 months, let's say, would be prioritized for these limited 40 apartments. So hopefully that helps clarify that there is still other criteria that is factored in. Other cities also use the system. It's called a coordinated entry system. We are very fortunate in our city. I'll tell you that. I've worked across the entire state of California, and we are very unique in that for a city our size, we have our own coordinated entry system, which really does allow us to prioritize in a way that most other cities don't get to for this type of housing.
Yeah, from my perspective, it just doesn't seem like you're really providing a value to the actual community who's lived here. It just seems like a loophole that you're like, it just seems like a loophole, listening to everybody's comments.
I hear your concern, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I think I will share a real anecdote from a recent supportive housing community that opened in our city, which is the
The one on
Laurel.
the Laurel?
You've heard it referenced, yeah. And there are individuals who moved in there who have been experiencing homelessness in our city for 10, 12, and one individual 25 years. So those are our residents.
And H, did you have any more questions?
I just would like to comment that I feel like this whole process has been a swindle. So I'm not happy with this.
Okay, thank you for your comments and questions. Esther?
So I'm not a professional social worker, but my church has been serving at the Salvation Army for the last 10 years and plus more. And then for the last 2 years, we've been serving dinner once every month. But I do have an opportunity to talk with people who come. So usually 100 to 140 people come for dinner. When I talk to these homeless people, I see some of the commonalities, and one is, most of them, either they have a mental issues or substance abuse issues. So these are some of the things that they are dealing with. Number two, they are very lonely. So they are, looking for community. So, number three, the third one is I've been seeing and talking to some people who've been homeless for 7 years, or even like one of the guys been homeless for 30 years, but they will never go into a housing, no matter what we do, because again, one of them said it's a state of mind. And we had an opportunity to house one of the homeless people, and he relapsed. and went back to homelessness. And so I'm just sharing this because there are officers like from the city and from the ones who are dealing with homeless people. I think that we do really have to reorient our thinking. What does really homeless people need? Do they really need individual homes? Because when they are just by themselves and there's no support, they are going to relapse. We are going to have problems in our neighborhood. Why don't we think about like building a group home where they can have the services that they need and then the emotional support that they can have? So, I mean, like, it's a great idea, building homes for like truly homeless people who really want to have a home and be able to sustain that lifestyle. But my experience or talking with homeless people, I mean, like veteran homeless people, I'm not so sure if building an individual apartment for them is a way to go.
Thank you, Esther, and thank you for your comment. Appreciate it. I think one thing to just highlight is that the supportive housing that's being proposed, there are services to support what you're talking about of previously unhoused individuals and households moving into homelessness, and so those services would be on site to help those households in that transition.
I would add that I hope you can come to the open house on Friday. We have a community garden and an active gardening program there, and that does help build community and decrease people's feelings of loneliness and isolation. We do have, it isn't TPC, but it's a different provider for the intensive case management services. There are 31 households where the head of household is a senior who was formerly homeless, came to us through the county's coordinated entry system, and then the other 31 units are for low-income, people who are 55 and over. But I hope you could come on Friday. It's a place where we're trying to address some of the things you raised, including the serious matter of being lonely. And so creating, Kevin Daly Architects knows how to design a building that creates opportunities for casual interaction where people can sit on a bench interior to the property and talk to their neighbors. So anyway, I hope you can join us on Friday.
Thank you. And Laura Lee.
Hi, sorry, I just want to say, would it be possible to open up another time to visit the property with a slight bit more notice than 2 days and on the day the Dodgers play in the World Series? And the traffic's going to be crazy that day, but I think it would be nice to extend an option for the future if that's possible.
Oh, we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. So I would have to find out which staff members could work on a Saturday. The Dodger game starts at 5.
Doesn't have to be a Saturday. I just said a little more than 2 days notice would be great. If we could offer it another time, another day, not Saturday.
Yeah, I guess, let's go follow through with the open house on Friday, see how it goes. And then I'll ask the on-site manager if maybe, I don't know, the following Friday, maybe we just pick 12 noon or something like that. So I'll look at it.
Okay, just saying that both Fridays won't work for people in Los Angeles, but any other day would be great.
Okay, you want a day other than a Friday? Okay.
Well, the next 2 Fridays, the Los Angeles Dodgers are playing in the World Series.
Okay, noted.
Thanks.
The Market, Soon Chung, and then Red Koi.
Hi, I just had one follow-up to NH had made a reference to the needle distribution at the Laurel. And I think what maybe she was referring to is what is called harm reduction kits that are available at the Laurel. Is that true? And if so, what are harm reduction kits, and would those ever be available at either one of these upcoming properties?
I can address that. And there are harm reduction kits that are available at the Laurel. We have folks who have medical conditions and sometimes use needles for injectables. And so I think the reference may be that we have sharps containers in the resident services area so that people can drop their, if they're using that for medical purposes, they can drop the needles in the sharps container so that they're not putting them in the trash. So I think that may be the confusion. That is not a needle exchange program. That's very different.
But the harm reduction kits do contain sharps.
They do.
And they're distributed on what basis?
Based on medical necessity.
Okay, so there has to be a proven medical necessity?
Correct.
And how is that regulated?
Through the resident's care provider.
Okay, so like a doctor's note of sorts?
Correct.
And is there a program, is there any line that a program like that will come to 14th Street or Euclid?
It's highly unlikely, although we may have some of the residents who have medical needs and will need that kind of service, but it's impossible to say at this point because we don't know who the residents are.
And is there a chance that addiction is ever considered a medical need?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Addiction is a disease that affects a lot of people, and could that be considered a medical need? Sometimes keeping people, yeah. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah,
I apologize.
Yeah, possibly.
Okay. So it's a slightly different needle distribution program.
Well, no, it is not a needle exchange program.
Correct.
We want to make sure for folks that have medical needs, if they use sharps, that there's a way for them to dispose of those sharps in the building with sharp containers. There, if any of you are familiar in healthcare settings, there are red containers that are sharp containers. And we want to make sure that folks are not putting those in the trash or distributing them in other ways that would be unsafe for them or other residents.
That makes total sense. My question was more into the distribution of sharps, which does sound like they do distribute needles at the Laurel.
We have harm reduction. We're not distributing needles in the way that I think you're trying to frame it, that we're just passing out needles to residents. That's not the way it happens.
Understood. It has to have some kind of medical precedent.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Red Koi, and then Soon Chung.
Am I muted?
No, you're not muted. We can hear you.
Just, I don't know, but Friday at noon, most people work at Friday at noon. I mean, why aren't we doing this on a weekend, like on a Sunday? I don't know anyone who has a full-time job who can go see your Gramercy place at noon, 12, 1 on a Friday. That doesn't make any sense. How are we supposed to go to that? Most of us work. We're like a working class neighborhood. So if we wanted to go, I guess we should just go on our own at any time. Wouldn't that be a better thing? To just show up and say, hi, we'd like to take a tour instead of this planned visit. And secondly, can I just ask you a question? When you say sharps and you say needles because of need, are you talking about people who have diabetes? People who need needles who are diabetics?
Yes, it could be. And let me clarify something in the harm reduction kits, because I wasn't specific, about that. In the harm reduction kits, generally, we'll have Narcan that's available, and we will have sanitary wipes for people. The needles are generally not in the actual harm reduction kits. They are available for people who have medical needs. So if they need to use injectable for insulin, for instance, that's a very common one. So I want to make sure that I'm being clear about this, because I think the questions seem to be indicating that a needle exchange program is for injection drug users who are exchanging used needles for clean needles, and that's not what is happening at the Laurel, and it will not be happening here. So I just want to make sure that people are clear about that.
Whether you're exchanging needles, that's kind of not what we're asking. We're asking, so you have you actually have a harm reduction kit provided there.
We do. It's available for folks.
And why is Narcan in there?
Narcan is an overdose medication. So if it's needed for people, it is available. Again, it's not distributed.
Why would Narcan need to be in there if they are just using it for medical use, like diabetes? Why would Narcan be in a low-income building with seniors, period? That makes no sense to me unless you know that there's a population in there that has high drug utilizers or are using high city services who have major issues. I don't understand. Why is Narcan being provided inside a senior living or family living environment?
We're not providing Narcan in the senior building or in the family buildings. There's no plan for Narcan there. The reason that
in the kit.
But we are not what I'm saying is we're not planning on having harm reduction kits available at this development. The reason that they're available at the Laurel is we have had some folks who experienced substance use who are tenants there, and we want to make sure that if Narcan is needed, that it's readily available.
And you're telling me that population of people are not going to be housed who have these?
That is not the plan for the population at this development, no.
And how do we get that assurance? Anyone?
Well, I think that's a matter of when the lease up happens in terms of determining who the tenants are going to be. So that'll be done in collaboration with the city.
So in fact, if some of these tenants are in this building, you then will provide Narcan and sharps.
That is not our intent in this building.
And you're not including glass pipes in your building?
No.
Thank you. Just given it's almost 9 o'clock now, and I just again want to be respectful of everybody's time. We'll do last few questions here with Soon Chung, Ellen Hannon, and then Jay.
Yeah, my concern is due process, notification time, way the meetings are held. Seems like there's an agenda already made up and you're pushing an agenda through. Act like that, you're hearing our voices. It creates a perception that citizens are not listened to. And there are several issues that we want to address. One is leasing. Can residents be part of the to put in some input on who you select to lease? Is it just the city and you don't have any say-so? Issue of parking is not addressed still. Crime is not addressed. Local Santa Monica citizens who want housing are not addressed either. So maybe, can I apply for that 6th floor space so I can have a beach view? I mean, it's our taxpayers' money. I don't mean to be that sarcastic, but this doesn't seem fair.
So thank you for your comments. We'll take that into consideration. So thank you.
Ellen Hannon, and then Jay.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. As someone who's had some addiction family members, I'd like to know, why are they allowed at the Laurel? If they're using needles for overdosing of some type of medication, it's not diabetes. I know, I'm a nurse. I know how diabetes is treated these days. You don't really use needles per se for diabetes these days. They have insulin pumps and much better care, and you can get them from the pharmacist very easily. If you actually have a medical doctor's certificate, it's very easy. You get the prescription from the pharmacy. So I am very concerned when I hear that at the Laurel, this brand new place that we have opening is already a failure, if you ask me. I can't think that I would recommend anyone to move into the Laurel. You know, any reasonable person would not want to live there if there's needle exchanges and Narcan has to be given out. Who would want to live in that type of situation? I mean, I've had that happen in my building here. I had heroin addicts, and it took us months to get rid of them, 6 months before we were able to get them out of our building. I'm just horrified to hear that. And I'd like to thank the woman who said those very nice things about the homeless at the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army is doing a fabulous job, in my view, of getting homeless people services. A much better job than the people concerned. They seem to have a much better understanding, and that woman really explained it very well, of how I see these people in my neighborhood, and I see them daily where I live. And I'm still very concerned about the parking. I'm not sure if that's what the city council meant when they said that they were postponing any decision on the parking. And I'm concerned that you're doing all this architectural planning and spending money on the building without that secondary idea that there needs to be parking in the building, public parking in the building. We have it down on 2nd and 5th Street north of Wilshire in those public housing senior buildings. There's a parking lot right there with meters inside the first floor of that building. And there's also metered parking outside of that building along the street. That street, there's metered parking there for the neighborhood, for people who need to go into the stores on Wilshire. So I think that there are some other things that you should be looking at, and I don't think you are. And I don't think you really are honest. I mean, the marijuana shop that opened right there in that corner, in their plan, in order to get that city permit to be there, they identified that parking lot as their secured parking for that building. That was in their plan when it was passed. And now it's no longer a marijuana shop. You stabbed us in the back in our neighborhood, and you allowed it now to become a regular marijuana for anyone to go in and use. Right next to this low-income housing, you have the marijuana shop. They just have to walk around the block to get high. So I'm just totally disgusted with the entire planning department. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And Jay, you'll be our final question for the evening.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I have to say, I am very devastated. As a mother to a 6-year-old, we always invite friends over and have play dates. And my concern is now with the parking situation that, our friends have to find somewhere. Maybe now in the situation it's going to be further away. We have a lot of foot traffic here with homelessness, and usually they come out at night. Some of the bold ones are out during the day. My building is right next to the Euclid parking structure. And I'm concerned that when we walk our friends, if they've you know, they live, they park far away. What is the security for us? My husband has been attacked by a homeless walking the dog. And now if I walk my friends with their 6-year-old child with my own son at night to walk them to the car, where is my security? How do I know that I'm going to get back to my house safely with my 6-year-old? My husband got attacked right in front of the building. So this is just insane. This is, you know, I see a bunch of you with your blurred, you know, backgrounds, but I can tell you live in a very nice house, very nice location. Excuse me. I'm very upset right now. And, you know, you blur it out because you don't want us to see how comfortably you're living. My husband and I work from home, so the construction is going to be a headache. It's being selfish. You take none of our questions seriously. You just take it into consideration and, you know, think on it. This is insane. And then another thing, I want to know, because I live in the building right next to the parking structure here on Euclid, we get a lot of homeless here coming through our alleys. What security is going to be available during the construction? They find any holes that they can go and do their drugs, which I should, you know, be a police officer myself as much as I connect with them through the phone calls that I have to give that someone's strung out, someone's about to die because they've overdosed in my alley. And I have it all on my cameras and videoed it as proof that these people do exist. So what are you guys going to do during the construction at night when no one is around and there's all these open holes from the construction where these people can come and do whatever they have to do? My son's room is right next to the parking structure. What security is going to be available around this area during the night hours where they're not working? This is insane. I hope you guys are enjoying your peaceful living while we have to deal with this nonsense that no one really thought about and considered and are just selfish about it because someone just wants to make money in their pockets. That's all. Please answer the questions about security at night when no one is working.
Hi, I'm Victoria Senna. I'm the Housing Development Director. So I'm the person who's in charge of actually getting the buildings built. And that's a good question about security at night. So we always have a security guard. Once all the workers are off the site, we have a security guard there. So there's always coverage. So whether it's the workers during the day or the security guard at night, we also always have security cameras. So it's pretty and well lit. So, and we also have fencing around the building during the construction. So we do take all that into consideration. I too have a 6-year-old. I get what you're saying. It's very concerning. But yeah, we do have a lot of security during construction.
And are these security officers, are they armed?
Oh, you know what? That's a good question. I don't know if they're armed. I don't know if they're
Okay,
armed.
so if someone comes attacking them, what are they supposed to do? I mean, I'm just considering my husband was attacked. He had to, you know, obviously defend himself. So I see a lot of cops come. They don't even want to get out of their car because some of them, you know, the females are scared. So you have a security guard at night. You have a fence that I see people jumping up, you know, jumping the fence often. These people will make do and make it happen any which way that they can. I'm not sure if any of you live around here or have even taken a day to come a couple of hours just to be around to see what foot traffic we have around here, or even at night to park your car, let's say, and hang around and see what's happening. Have you all ever done anything like that?
Yeah,
we live here. We live here. We know. And I'm not sure where you live with your 6-year-old, but for me, I'm struggling as it is as a mother with my son who is crying because we have this beautiful tree on the Euclid side of the parking lot. My 6-year-old is crying to me when I tell him that they're going to build. He's concerned about his grandmother's favorite tree right there and cries. And I'm not making this up. Why would I? This is insane. My 6-year-old cries to me because of that tree that's about to go down for a building structure that you guys didn't even think to consider us and how we feel. And everything that we say, you say we take it into consideration. We'll think about it.
Well, we welcome you to come to the open house. I think that might give you some better feeling about the building itself. And again, with the security guard, I mean, it is a good deterrent to have a security guard there. It's a good question whether or not they're armed. They could be. I just don't know about that, but I can check into it for you. And thank you for your comment. Appreciate it.
You know, some of these questions, and thank you all for taking the questions and taking the time to listen. With some of these questions, it's just common sense to have an answer for. And when you say I don't know, it really means I don't care. Like, you should have come up with these answers. Security, homelessness, people find holes to go and stay in. Obviously, during construction, people are going to try to go in there and do what they have to do, mostly drugs. I have it on tape. I call SMPD, if not every other day. So I know the situation that's going on in my alley.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time out of your busy lives to be here tonight. Just want to acknowledge that, we do care. This city staff is here. Nothing is being dismissed, and I just want to assure that every comment, every question tonight, we did our best to answer that. And nothing is being dismissed, and certainly apologies if it came off that way at all. That certainly was not the intent at all. Acknowledge that there is a lot of frustration, and you have every right to feel something that is being proposed here. But again, just want to assure that none of the questions, none of the comments are being dismissed. And again, that if you do have following this meeting, any follow-up questions, the website hchcsantamonica.org is open to October 31st. So please submit those. It is our intent to be here to answer those questions. And you can reach out to anybody on the development team, certainly on the city team. We welcome the communication, welcome the feedback. We're here because we care, and we do want to listen, to the community. So again, thank you all so much for being here tonight, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you all.